So, did you watch the entire public hearing related to Heather Johnston's?
Multiple times, yeah, because I was grabbing
Oh,
quotes and stuff for the article. So,
multiple times. I should read your article then.
well, it's not like a. Okay, here's what I will say about watching it multiple times. I think that whole meeting should be transcribed.
Yeah, I was personally very affected by it. I thought,
Yeah, I think it should be in the public record, everybody's statement. I just can't write an article like that. I wish I was more than one person, but I think it would be a great contribution to the public record
it's
for that entire thing to be transcribed.
because it's remarkable to have staff, current and former staff in the city coordinator's office, speaking against their boss.
Yes.
I don't know. There are professional consequences for going on the record, not speaking anonymously,
Yes.
about systemic racism within the city, a hostile work environment,
Yes.
that sort of thing. And it brought me back to the conversation about question one, the strong mayor charter amendment. I've been thinking about how they did charter commission in the clerk's office did these anonymous interviews with department heads about how unbearable it was living under the 14 bosses. Do you remember 14 bosses, Melody?
How could I forget?
And so we changed our government structure in part in response to the anonymous complaints of department heads who had to speak anonymously for fear of the professional consequences. And here we have dozens of below management level city staff, lots of black and brown staff speaking out publicly on the record using their real names, looking their boss in the eye and saying the conditions we are working under are intolerable and we're looking to you on the city council using the power you have left as the legislative body to fix this by not putting this person who is not up to the job into this job.
Yeah, can we do do you mind if I do a little recap if people are a little behind on what we're talking
Go
about?
ahead.
So, the quick recap is that Mayor Frey, and I wrote about this, so we'll, link it, like the URL. Like, when people link to stuff that you can't click on Instagram where it's like
Link in bio.
www.southwestvoices.news.
Link in bio.
Yeah, well, some people are still behind the times. They're a millennial like me, and they'll just put the whole URL. Anyways, Mayor Frey appointed Heather Johnston as interim city coordinator last summer when the existing city coordinator left. Now the mayor has been like, okay, we need a permanent city coordinator. So I nominate our interim city coordinator, Heather Johnston, to be the permanent one. City council, please vote to approve my nomination. And then it was kind of like record scratch, like skirk, like squeak, or like a tire scratch, like squeak,
I don't
whatever.
have a sound effect.
Okay, well,
I have this.
And I feel like everyone's time is being taken up, including all of the people in the audience.
That's all I have.
yeah, it was a long session. But so basically what happened was once that was announced that was going to be Mayor Frey's nomination, a lot of city staff that works under her wrote a public letter and contacted the media, which in my world, I wear many hats. I used to be a community organizer, union organizer. Contacting the media is kind of like a last, we don't ever want to do it, but we do it if our internal workings have not worked out, right? We're trying to do it internally, and then it doesn't work out. And so then we go to the media. So they went to the media, and, even without them speaking out, there was some city council people were already kind of I think, hesitant to support her to begin with, right? Or do you think the city council people found out because of that letter? I guess that's hard to say. But no, Elliot Payne knew, he was aware, right? Because he's been,
Probably.
What I can say is that when the nomination was officially made, there was time for there was a public hearing granted for the nomination process, which I think is typical for nominations.
Yeah. They all
Yeah.
go to public hearing.
And
So
some are whatever. They're never like this. They're never full of like an hour and a half of people, both that supported her and did not support her, testifying for a really long time.
yeah.
And so that's what John was then talking about, was like, then all of a sudden all these city staff people, none of which were her bosses, all below her in the, in the executive order, testifying against her boss, which is like, yeah, imagine you doing that at home, listeners and viewers. Like, it's not an easy thing to do, even if you hate your boss, even though if you know you're right. It's not something that you just wake up and decide to do.
And there was a dynamic of, so this isn't personal. This isn't necessarily about Heather Johnston. There were a little bit of a cross section of support. So you had like Steve Kramer testifying in support of her, Carol Becker testifying in support of her, somebody from the Minneapolis Chamber testifying in support, but also people like
Mayor
Robert,
R.T. Ryback.
Former Mayor R.T. Ryback, but also Elizabeth Glidden, former council member who was pretty progressive, and Robert Lilligren. So, but it was people at a peer level to Heather Johnston, like people who she either like elected officials above her, kind of, or people she worked with as colleagues in a colleague style relationship.
Right, like worked with, not
And-
worked. Yeah.
And one of the criticisms from some of the members of the community and staff who spoke was, we don't doubt she's a wonderful person to work with, who knows her stuff, who make a great budget director or CFO, for example, but she's just not the right person to foster an anti-racist, a safe place to work that supports Black and brown staff. She's not the leader for that role. And there was an effort and a theme in that testimony that this is about leadership, and she's not the right leader to help lead the way with these larger problems in the city enterprise.
Yeah, and I'll clarify that too, in that when you were saying, John, that it's not, why people were saying it's not personal and why she's not the right person to lead these efforts. So a narrative or a theme that came out in people testifying or just speaking their experience was that these systemic racism issues and the toxic work environment came before Heather Johnston. Like that was made very clear. It wasn't that she blew in and created all of this. Right. The issue is that she walked into this culture, and council member Latricia Vitaud acknowledged that she knew that Johnston did know that she was coming into this work culture that existed. But she is not, the workers, the staff feel like she is not the person to start untangling this toxicity that is in place. And that they've shared anecdotes, suggesting that she's not the right person to do this really heavy racism-based work, which is very hard to do. And is like a great example of how the murder of George Floyd is an everyday thing that we are working on, because that was when they started bringing up, we all said 2 years ago we were going to do this right and start breaking down the status quo. And here we are, we're telling you she represents the status quo. We can't have that anymore, right? It's time to do another shakeup. And Jacob Frey definitely is not interested in shaking up this nomination. So
before this all happened, almost the entire staff of the Division of Race and Equity at the city of Minneapolis left.
Yeah.
Decided, and it's by accounts from staff at the city, it's because of things like this. And one potential of disregarding the input in the outcry from staff, if you take their accounts seriously, is that there could be an exodus of Black and brown staff from the city of Minneapolis people who just care about doing this work.
Yes. I was just going to say that the institution that I worked for before working at Southwest Voices was going through a very similar culture shift where they hired people, right? They finally got their act together, their racist act together, I guess. And we're like, all right, we're going to hire on a bunch of Black and brown people. And then the retention levels for the Black and brown people were incredibly low because they weren't working on the culture of our workplace. And so it just was a problem to begin with. And then it also includes people who are doing the work that might not identify as Black or brown, but like do the advocacy work. And it's just so exhausting. Like I could relate to a lot of the things people were sharing, unfortunately, because I experienced that stuff at my old job, or I would hear people's stories. And it's just like, yeah, you just want to get out because you're just burned out. And the work is so important to you that you know that like your energy is not being used in the best way in these spaces. And so it was just a bummer to hear that stuff because I was like, oh, I know. Yep, I've been in that kind of workplace before. So it's a very real threat. Like it's not a veiled threat. Like people will leave. People already left and they will continue to leave.
Yeah, there was testimony from one person. I can't remember if she currently worked. I think she left. Mm-hmm. And she's a white woman who said she was recounting these various events like,
I once sat in a meeting with a public works manager who, upon seeing some Middle Eastern names of my colleagues, just settled on calling them Aladdin Abubu and Dayo for the rest of the meeting. The other participants nervously chuckled along. That manager still works here. Those BIPOC employees do not. I talked to a few BIPOC coworkers when the racist Christmas tree that was up in the lobby of the 4th Precinct Police Station was not known in the press yet. It was decorated with packs of Newport cigarettes and Popeye's chicken packaging. Before it broke in the news, that Black coworker talked to his white supervisor, asking if he could switch assignments with a white coworker so that he didn't have to go there and fix computers because he didn't like walking past that tree. The supervisor's reaction? He told that Black employee to close his eyes when he walked past it. That manager still works here. The BIPOC employee does not.
And she went through a bunch of stories like that and said, the person who did that still works here. Those Black and brown employees do not still work here.
Yes.
Things like that. Also, is his name Brian Smith, the Office of Performance and Innovation, who is fairly high ranking within the city coordinator's office. He manages the team of people who basically developed the behavioral crisis response team who deal with some mental health issues. Basically, the big project that came in response to George Floyd's murder by MPD. The only thing we can like point to and say, here's the new thing we developed as an alternative to police response in the city.
Yeah, so when you call 911.
He manages that team of people, and he's a Black man, and he was basically vouching for the accounts of the staff testimony from that day and said,
but I want people to know that if you can use us in that way, knowing this is a sometimes horrible place to work, but you can brag on our work, but still want us to remain unseen, unheard, disrespected, and put in the background like some slave, it can't continue. And so I'm proud of my staff. I'm proud of sustainability. And I'm proud of others for taking the risk that they've taken. I know this may be the very last day that I speak to any of you. It just might be that way. And so I'm just coming up here. I'm not trying to tell people how to vote, yay or nay on Heather, but I do want you to consider what it is you say out of your mouths, what it is you write in documents, and whether or not you have the right person to make that become a reality, because they've not demonstrated that in previous jobs or this one. Thank you.
Yeah, he got pretty, I quoted him a lot. But in case I'm just going to read one thing that I think maybe you're referring to. So this is Smith saying this. I want people to know that if you can use us in that way, basically like being proud of the work that we're doing, knowing that this is sometimes a horrible place to work, but you can brag on our work, but still want us to remain unseen, unheard, disrespected, and put in the background like some slave. It can't continue. That was some powerful testimony.
Yeah, and I would recommend for people to watch all of that testimony. It is maybe 90 minutes or more of testimony. It is quite a lot, but also worth hearing.
It is. It's because people bring in the larger movement that we're in right now, and there were multiple people. I think you remember this, John, that they spoke directly to the city council and said, like, you're voting for the status quo that we've been trying to dismantle for many years regarding racial justice work. So if you vote for her, you're voting for that status quo. Like, that's your legacy. I think that maybe that was something else that Smith said, was like, this is your legacy. Somebody said that to the council. And I think that, like, that's really powerful. Like, and that must be a hard place for somebody. Well, I don't want to, like, whatever. You can critique what I'm about to say, but, like, that must be a really hard spot for somebody to be in if they're like, oh yeah, I really support Johnston because of all the wonderful work she did to, like, get our city financially secure, right? But now all these people are saying that, like, basically, if I vote for her, I'm voting for racism. Basically, it's like they were being pretty clear about that, and you're supporting a systemic racist system that isn't going to change.
And if the department, like, explodes, if the city coordinator's office just, if we're hemorrhaging talented staff who do a lot of the work that makes the city run, that are trying to turn the ship of the city in a more racially equitable way, if we lose that staff, and you have another story like we had with the Division of Race Equity, that's very embarrassing to the people who voted for Heather Johnston's nomination. I feel like I'm dragging. You're
not dragging. I actually want to say to that, though, like, gosh, this is going to sound harsher than maybe I want to say with my own voice, but, like, are they embarrassed? Because, like, like you said, we've had all these reports about the police. We've had, like, usually when people complain or wage complaints against bosses, you never get the kind of detail that these workers were willing to supply.
Yeah, this never happens. That's another reason why people should.
We're not being sarcastic, like, because you and I can be pretty dry and sarcastic. Like, we're being serious. Like, this never happens. Are they going to be embarrassed? Because otherwise, I feel like the meeting that happened late last week, where they could have voted on it, but City Council Vice President Linnea Palmisano, moved to delay it. If they were in agreement that, like, no, she's got to go, we wouldn't be having this delay conversation, right?
Yeah, even the mayor was like, I support delay. I support getting to the bottom of this kind of thing. I don't know.
Oh, right. So this is the other thing that listeners and viewers might not know, is why there was a delay. So there's technically an HR investigation going on about the city coordinator's office, which we can assume to mean a large part of that is going to be about Heather Johnston's leadership. Unclear. She is the leader. I would say, like, if Southwest Voices was under investigation, I would be part of that large investigation because I'm the editor. I would be a little nervous if my office was under investigation.
Melody, you warned me ahead of time that you have shit to do, and
did you just cut me off?
This is my way of moving us on to another topic. So
did you just cut me off mid-sentence when I was going to make a point?
Yeah.
Okay, hang out. You have worse ADHD than I do, I think.
I'm trying to respect your time.
I appreciate that. I want to say one more. Let me just finish my thought.
Okay.
That the delay was because some people wanted to see what the results were of the HR investigation. Because let's say that they vote her in and then the investigation comes back and it's, full of problems and red flags around Johnston, that the city council doesn't have any power to, like, rescind their vote. So that was another little variable that got added in. Okay, now my thought's done, and now you can transition.
Let me put on my pundit hat, because I have talked to absolutely no one with any inside information on this, but I think her nomination may be in trouble. Just based on that public hearing that I watched.
Who do you think you want to do a vote? Like
No,
a
we
vote
shouldn't
prediction?
Count votes. We shouldn't count votes or predict votes, but
Okay, well, you said it
I
was
don't
in
know.
trouble,
It
so
seems
I
like
hope
this
it's
is
in
a
trouble.
this is a very large red flag, and I know we elected a bunch of clunkers to the city council in 21, but maybe we have a majority of them who don't want to go down this road, who are willing to listen to the red flag. I also worry that maybe it gets a little political, because you've got like the chamber and Steve Kramer on one side and Carol Becker, and it can feel like politics, but it's also like the serious work of the city, and having a city government that is healthy and functions well and does good work and has a good environment for the people who work there, because those people do important work. It's important. It's not politics. I hope it doesn't become like, I support the mayor. We must confirm his nomination because the mayor is my friend kind of thing.